So my name is Ash. I'm pretty sure Regis invites me to these things because I can tell three different stories, so he gets three for the price of one. But essentially, I'm just going to sort of take you through my very long and convoluted way of getting to where I am today. Um, I have kind of lied to Miriam in the sense that I don't actually work for InSitGen anymore. I actually work at the hospital as a doctor, but I will still talk through InSitGen and what I did and what the benefits and roles of that are. So this is my very long and convoluted way of getting to where I am today. I did health sci like probably most of you have done. And then I did a neuroscience degree, and then I was lost and didn't know what the hell I was going to do. And so I did an honors degree. And then I was still kind of like, I like research, but it's also kind of scary. And then I'm like, now what the hell am I going to do? So I thought I should just test the waters a bit more. So I did a master's degree. And then I was like, well, I really liked that, but do I want to do 3 more years of that? And then someone convinced me to do 3 more years of it. Um, and so I did a PhD. And so I did a PhD in physiology with Phil Sheard, who I'm not sure if any of you guys will know or not. So I did a PhD, and then I got to the end of that, and I was like, cool, that's a lot of money. What do I do now? Research and science is interesting, but I don't want to be. I don't know if I want to be a scientist forever. So I have come into these sort of three different jobs that I had across the following sort of 6 years. So there was being a teaching fellow, which is what Regis does now, and you would have met before. I worked at InSitGen, which is a startup company based here in Dunedin, and then I entered med school because I thought, a little more punishment of study. So I guess I'll start with science and, plug that science is really a great opportunity for lots of people. You guys have all done a science degree and you're in the process of doing a science degree. But then I guess the question is you finish 3 years, or some of you may have been in the process of an honors degree, and you're kind of like, what do I do now? Is it like, what are the benefits? What are the cons of doing research? I guess the difficulty is that doing a degree is kind of the new norm. You either go and do a trade, or you go to university and you do a degree. And then you kind of come out and you all have great skills. But then the question is, how do I separate myself from everybody else? And so doing postgraduate study can be a good way of doing that. So whether that be an honors degree or a master's degree, or even further on beyond that as a PhD, they give you amazing skills that you can't really put your finger on until you've actually done it and you look back and you think, crap, I know a lot more things than I did previously. You get opportunity to meet people, you learn more skills. A lot of them come with scholarships, and so they pay money. They are they're going to give you more skills and different skills that you don't get just from a normal degree. So you obviously do go to labs and do things in your labs that are all set in structured ways. This is a great way of creating independent learning, but under someone else's guidance, so that you make sure you get to timelines. The downside is that it does require quite a lot of self-motivation. So unlike this, where they told you had to come to this at 7 o'clock, or they told you have to go to your lectures at 8 o'clock, and you turn up and begrudgingly, you've got an exam at the end. With an honors degree, a master's degree, a PhD, it's kind of down to you to make sure that you get it done. Your supervisor can only knock on your door so many times, and then you just have to get it done. They are competitive. There's lots of people want to do them, and they can be quite time consuming, and they can apply a lot of pressure. But I think they make your job application, your CV at the end, much better. So I think if you are unsure when you get to the end of your degree, if actually you want to do a bit more, doing postgraduate study is something you should definitely consider. Teaching. So I think Andrew already talked about doing sort of being a lab demonstrator as being a really important thing to try and get involved in. I was a teaching fellow for 12 months after I finished after I finished study in the physiology department. So teaching into hubs, into physiology papers, which are now your biomedical science papers. And I think those are really important skills because it meant that I got to meet lots of guys like you and girls like you. You get one-on-one teaching, you get to learn and create relationships. It actually pays pretty good. It's a pretty good progression through the university as well. You can sort of guide yourself and work your way through into different opportunities in different areas. And it's also a reasonably good setup because the course doesn't change a huge amount. So there's quite a steep learning curve initially, and you're always learning things, but then actually it's sort of, you can turn up and you can talk to people and you can teach the course without too much work. So it can be quite useful in that sense. The downside is that the university is ever changing, courses are ever changing, job security is ever changing, and it can be quite hard to get involved. The hardest thing with teaching fellows and demonstrators is actually just getting in the door. It's all about who you know and your reputation. So I think if you can get in early-ish when you're 300 level students teaching into 100 level papers, or if you're honors students teaching into papers, the sooner you can get involved and the more people you talk to and know, the better. There's always job applications out there. They always need lab demonstrators to help and guide things because, as you guys know, labs don't run without demonstrators and without teaching fellows. So I think that's another really useful thing to consider if you're not quite sure what you want to do. Then there's industry. So I worked at a startup company called Insitugen. So it's a biotech company that essentially works on creating bioassays that can detect androgen levels and estrogen levels in different samples. The idea being that they can create an at-home test or kit that allows you to detect these things for whether it be human testing for sports and science. So the idea is the ultimate goal for these guys is to try and create a bioassay they can use for drug doping and doping in sports like the Olympics. But then actually they're also trying to go into more slightly niche things like pet testing for making sure that people have got purebred animals and creating the best lines for beef and cattle and those sorts of things. And they're also doing quite a lot of research in water sample testing and working out whether or not the impacts of estrogen on farming and for things like fish. The pros of this is that it does pay really well. You have job security and it's a 9 to 5 job. You turn up, you have a set sort of jobs you need to do. You have things that are set out in front of you, and you complete your tasks, and then you go home and you can forget it and you go home. Other jobs aren't quite like that. They give you opportunities to do conferences, go on trips, you get published, you do all sorts of things. Downsides is that it can be quite repetitive. So particularly in this sort of thing, you run the same assay 100 times to prove that the assay works because you need sample sizes and an N that is proving that things are working. It is unfortunately quite difficult to get in. Startup companies aren't huge in New Zealand. There are a few around, particularly in small places like Dunedin. You need to go to bigger centres like Auckland and Christchurch and Wellington, where they have larger access to those sorts of things. But there are small companies like this that are always hiring, particularly graduates and ones with honours degrees, looking for people who are interested in basic sciences and have an understanding of particularly things like biochemistry and physiology. Unfortunately, like all things, industry is quite cutthroat. They all work on funding. They all work on the ability to get money and can continue to fund themselves or self-fund. And so for that reason, it can be a little bit stressful, but it's useful. And so something to consider. And there's always job opportunities there as well. And then I am currently a house officer or a junior doctor at the hospital. So I did the alternate category of medicine. So there's, health science, then there's the graduate entry, and then there's the alternative category, where essentially you've done something else outside of a degree and then come back and they think that you can contribute. So in that category of people, often there's lots of different people. There's people in my class that were teachers. There's people in my class that were accountants. There are people that were, there's a secretary. They all had to go and do health science again to show that they had the basic science knowledge. But you can see that the idea is that it's trying to make doctors and medicine match the community better, rather than just having all people that are basic sciences. Obviously, I can talk about being a doctor. Pros are that you hear stories and patients share information with you that they don't share with their closest family members a lot of the time. You are involved in life-changing events for a lot of people, and that can make a big difference. Your constantly learning, which could also be a negative because it's constantly draining. Everything is ever changing. I actually remember there's a statement that my PhD supervisor told me, that everything that we learn now and everything that I tell you now will be probably wrong in 10 years' time. And that's true in medicine as it is in everything else. Everything we learn, and sort of as Kushla probably mentioned, that everything we do, genetics is changing, how we interpret everything. And so everything in medicine changes. The thing I like to point out for the cons is that being a doctor is not what it's made out to be. It's definitely not as fun and as beautiful as Grey's Anatomy makes it. And it's not even as exciting as The Pit makes it. It is, particularly as a junior doctor, you're kind of just an overpaid secretary. You wander around the hospital taking notes for people who have been doing what you did 20 years ago. And the hours are very long. You get paid not particularly well for the amount of hours that you do. And when you factor in the hourly wage, it's almost minimum wage. And I think I'd like to point, because there's often a lot of people in these talks that I give them to that are thinking about doing medicine, and I just make sure that everyone considers seriously the decision to make it, because it's not a light decision. And if you do medicine itself, it's 5 years to do a medical degree, plus 2 years of being a junior doctor, and then a minimum of another 5 years to become a specialist. That's assuming you pass the exams. So you're talking somewhere around the 12-year mark to become a specialist in your area. And most of those, I have a 15-hour shift tomorrow, and then another one on Friday. So they're long days, and you look after somewhere between 50 and 100 people. So it can be quite a lot of responsibility, quite a lot of pressure. And I highlight this one here, the imposter syndrome, is probably the hardest thing that you go through. It's not a medicine specific thing. It's a every degree specific thing. You're sitting around people, your neighbors who are all very smart people, and you always think you're not smart enough to be doing this or to be doing the thing, and you worry that the next day you'll forget or do something, or something will be wrong, and you always consider that you're not going to be good enough, and that will never go away, unfortunately. You just kind of learn to cope, and you learn to be better at what you do, and then you step into a new role and the whole thing starts all over again. And it's normal. So I think you should just remember that it's normal. And that everyone feels the same way. But I think if you are interested in doing medicine, it's another great alternative. And the alternative pathway, if people have questions, is a really good way for people like you guys who may do some other things first and want to come back and realize that being a doctor is what you want to do. If anyone, I don't have my email up because I forgot to put it on. If anyone has any questions or wants to contact me, just contact either through Miriam, or I'm on LinkedIn, so you can add me on LinkedIn, or my email is just my name @gmail.com. It's nice and simple.